The Third Crusade, also known as the King's Crusade, was defined by its high-profile leadership and dramatic confrontations. Sparked by the fall of Jerusalem to the Muslim Sultan Saladin in 1187, this crusade saw European monarchs, including Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire, join forces in an ambitious attempt to reclaim the holy city for Christendom. Hello, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, it's good to meet you, and if you're coming back, it's great to have you back with me. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon links are in the comments and description. Otherwise, a like, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined goes a long way. Now, to the topic at hand. A full history of the Third Crusade. Please make yourself comfortable. So let's start right at the beginning and give a bit of background. In 1185, the death of King Baldwin IV marked a turning point for the Kingdom of Jerusalem, one of the Crusader states, as he left the realm in the hands of his young nephew, Baldwin V, whom he had previously appointed as co-king in 1183. With Baldwin V being only a child at this time, Count Raymond III of Tripoli resumed his role as regent. But tragically, the young king's life was cut short, and he passed away before reaching the age of 9 in the following year. In a bold move, Baldwin IV's sister, Sibylla, took the crown for herself, and also crowned her husband, Guy of Lusignan, as king, with the support of Reynald of Chatillon. Reynald, pushing the boundaries of peace, attacked a wealthy caravan en route from Egypt to Syria and imprisoned its travelers. This effectively violated a truce with Saladin, the Muslim leader. So Saladin demanded the release of the prisoners and the return of the goods, a request that King Guy, the new ruler, supported. However, Reynald defied these demands, setting the stage for a conflict. This defiance provided Saladin with the pretext he needed to launch an offensive against the Kingdom of Jerusalem. In 1187, he besieged Tiberias. Despite Raymond's counsel for patience, Guy, who was swayed by Reynald's influence, led his forces to the Horns of Hattin, near Tiberias. There, Saladin's army engaged the parched and disheartened Frankish soldiers, culminating in the decisive Battle of Hattin on July 1187. In the aftermath, both Guy and Reynald were captured and brought before Saladin. In a gesture of respect towards Guy, Saladin offered him water to quench his thirst. When Guy shared this water with Reynald, Saladin used this act to deny Reynald his protection, ultimately executing him for past treacheries. Guy, however, was spared immediate death, taken to Damascus and later ransomed back to his people. By the end of 1187, Saladin's victories had expanded to include the capture of Acre and Jerusalem itself, marking a significant loss for the Christian forces, who would not regain control of Jerusalem again until 1229. The news of these events reportedly led to the death of Pope Urban III from shock, and his successor, Pope Gregory VIII interpreted the fall of Jerusalem as divine punishment for the sins of Christians across Europe and issued the papal bull Audita Tremendi on the 29th of October 1187. This bull called for a new crusade to reclaim the lost Holy Land. Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire expedition to the Holy Land stands as one of the most well-prepared and organized crusading efforts in history. By the time he embarked on this venture, Frederick was a seasoned leader of 66 years. This monumental effort is documented in two main accounts: the history of the expedition of Emperor Frederick and the history of the pilgrims, with an additional brief piece, the letter on the death of Emperor Frederick, shedding light on its conclusion. So, the call to arms for this crusade came in the wake of Jerusalem's fall to Saladin. Pope Gregory VIII wasted no time in rallying support for the new crusade. Within mere weeks, he dispatched letters across the German episcopate, urging the mobilization of German nobility for the just cause. Frederick Barbarossa received personal appeals from the beleaguered rulers in the east, calling for his aid against the Muslim forces. By early November, the papal envoy, Cardinal Henry of Marseille, was appointed to preach the crusade throughout Germany. His efforts, alongside those of Bishop Henry of Strasbourg, culminated in a significant assembly in Strasbourg where around 500 knights pledged to take the cross. However, Frederick was initially hesitant to commit, citing conflicts with Archbishop Philip of Cologne. Nevertheless, he sought to persuade Philip of France, his ally at the time, though efforts were thwarted by Philip's ongoing conflict with England. Which leads us to the pivotal gathering in Mainz on March 27, 1188, dubbed the Court of Christ, where Frederick officially embraced and supported the cause. The assembly saw a reconciliation with the Archbishop of Cologne, and under the influence of a rousing sermon by Bishop Godfrey of Würzburg, Frederick took up the cross. His commitment was mirrored by his son, Duke Frederick VI of Swabia, and a lineup of other prominent leaders, including Duke Frederick of Bohemia, Leopold V of Austria, and Landgrave Louis III of Thuringia, alongside numerous other nobles. With the cross taken up, Frederick declared a general expedition against the pagans, adhering to the papal directive. He set a meticulous preparation period from April 17th, 1188 to April 8th, 1189, while the assembly scheduled for St. George's Day, April 23rd, 1189 in Regensburg. To maintain order and ensure the crusade's effectiveness, a financial requirement was established. Participants needed at least 3 marks, sufficient to sustain themselves for 2 years. This measure aimed to prevent the expedition from devolving into chaos, as the previous ones often did, ensuring that only those who adequately prepared and equipped would join the ranks of what was to become the most memorable crusading endeavors of the Middle Ages. Now, in a proactive move to finance the crusade and ensure the safety of the Jewish community, Frederick Barbarossa levied a quite modest tax on the Jews in Germany. This financial contribution towards the crusade efforts came with a strong mandate for their protection, explicitly prohibiting any preaching against them. And I'm sure that the Jews were rather glad to hear this, because the previous crusades were not a very good time for them, especially in Germany. Now, this decree was significant, especially considering this previous history, which were tainted by all of these outbreaks. Frederick's measures proved effective in preventing such atrocities within his realm during the Third Crusade. But England, however, witnessed plenty of violence against Jews, and other areas of Europe was the same. Now, despite all of these precautions, tensions had to surface. On January 29, 1188, a mob, rather angry mob, stormed the Jewish quarter in Mainz, prompting many Jews to seek refuge in the Imperial castle of Münzenberg. The Court of Christ in March saw further disturbances. Rabbi Moses Har Cohens of Mainz noted minor incidences from early March, escalating to a near invasion of the Jewish quarter by a mob on March the 26th. The situation was diffused by the imperial marshal, Henry of Calden, and further reinforced by an imperial edict from Frederick, warning of very severe penalties for those who harmed any Jews. A public display of solidarity followed on March the 29th, as Frederick and Rabbi Moses rode through Mainz together, underlining the imperial commitment to Jewish safety. And by the end of April, those Jews who had originally fled began to return, very much reassured of their protection. Well, parallel to these measures, Frederick embarked on diplomatic efforts essential for the Crusade's success. He sent envoys to negotiate safe passage and provisions for his army through various territories, including Hungary, the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, and the Byzantine Empire, with possible outreach to Leo II of Armenia. Acknowledging the need to formally end his previous treaty of friendship with Saladin, Frederick sent Count Henry II of Dietz with an ultimatum to Saladin in the May of 1188. This message demanded Saladin's withdrawal from the conquered lands, the return of the true cross, and reparations for slain Christians, under the threat of terminating their alliance. The true cross, by the way, was a relic that was believed to have been the cross that Jesus was crucified on. This was a relic that was taken in the victory of the Muslim conquerors over the Christians in the previous crusades. So, of course, they really wanted that one back. Now, as the Crusades' preparations progressed, Frederick received envoys from several key regions in Nuremberg just after Christmas in 1188. These diplomatic engagements yielded promises of provisions and safe passage from the Hungarians and the Seljuks, along with a reception promise from the Serbian Grand Prince. A critical agreement with the Byzantine Empire was finally secured, contingent upon oaths from prominent crusade leaders for their conduct. Of course, all the looting and pillaging was in living memory for the Byzantines. A delegation was then dispatched to Byzantium, and preparations were beginning to be finalized. In the winter gathering of 1187 at Strasbourg, amidst the fervor and excitement to reclaim the Holy Land, Bishop Godfrey of Würzburg presented an ambitious proposal to Frederick Barbarossa to transport the crusading army by sea rather than the perilous overland route. Frederick, however, was unmoved by this suggestion, a stance that was later reinforced by Pope Clement III, who explicitly instructed Godfrey to abandon this line of discussion. Now, despite these directives, many German crusaders took matters into their own hands, bypassing the designated assembly at Regensburg and heading straight to Sicily, hoping to find maritime passage to the Holy Land themselves. This deviation prompted Frederick to appeal to King William II of Sicily, requesting a halt to these independent parties, likely spurred by concerns that Saladin's forces would soon overpower the remaining Crusader strongholds along the coast. As the first of the reigning monarchs to embark on the holy mission, Frederick Barbarossa commenced his journey with a symbolic act of piety, accepting the pilgrim's staff and scrip in Hagenau on the 15th of April 1189. His arrival at Regensburg for the muster revealed a gathering far smaller than he had originally anticipated, which of course stirred more than a few doubts about the general viability of the crusade. Yet the revelation that an international contingent had already positioned itself at the Hungarian frontier, awaiting the German Emperor's lead, certainly stirred Frederick's resolve up again. With a force initially estimated between 12,000 to 20,000 men, including a significant contingent of knights, Frederick's army embarked from Regensburg on May 11th, 1189. This force, as it traversed through Europe, swelled with additional contingents from Hungary, Burgundy, and Lorraine, hinting at the final tally significantly exceeding the number that departed Germany. This growing force reflected both the magnetic pull of Frederick's leadership, but also the broader European commitment to the Crusader cause in general. The journey to the Holy Land itself was marked by incidents that tested the discipline and resolve of the crusading army. From the punitive burning of the Mauthausen, in response to an imposed toll to the expulsion of unruly elements in Vienna, Frederick's leadership navigated both logistical challenges and matters of martial discipline. His issuance of an ordinance for good behavior before Pressburg underscored a commitment to maintaining order and purpose among his ranks. Certainly did not want a repeat of the looting and pillaging of the First and Second Crusade. Quite an embarrassment and, frankly, not very Christian behavior. But then again, you're not yourself when you're hungry. Now, the journey through Hungary under the auspices of King Bela III illustrated the collaborative spirit among the Christian monarchs, even if they disagreed on little things politically. The Hungarian king even provided essential supplies and escorted the Crusaders to the threshold of Byzantine territory. As Frederick Barbarossa's crusading army advanced, the journey took them through the strategic heartlands of the Balkans, each step marked by diplomatic nuances and military reorganizations designed to navigate the complex politics en route to the Holy Land. Departing Belgrade on July 1st, the army, bolstered by the presence of King Bela III of Hungary, crossed the Morava River towards Branisjevo. This locale had risen in importance as a Byzantine and administrative center after Belgrade's devastation in recent conflicts. Here, the mutually beneficial exchange of wagons for boats with the Hungarian King Bela III marked the end of his accompaniment, highlighting the logistical considerations that were pivotal for the Crusade's progress. Now at Branisjevo, the arrival of the Burgundian and Metz contingents reinforced Frederick's forces, while provisions supplied by the local duke underscored the vital support from the Byzantine officials, despite emerging tensions. We'll get to them later. The journey along the Via Militaris towards Constantinople was fraught with danger, including harassment by bandits who reportedly acted under local Byzantine orders. Certainly an undercurrent of hostility and mistrust. Well, the communications between Frederick and the Byzantine Emperor Isaac II Angelos, already strained, were further complicated by Isaac's military engagements away from the capital. The situation led Frederick to dispatch additional envoys to ascertain the Byzantine stance. At Nice, Frederick's encounter with the Grand Prince Stefan Nemanja of Serbia showcased an intricate diplomacy at play. While extending hospitality, Nemanja sought formal recognition of his rule, a request Frederick diplomatically denied, citing his pilgrimage's sanctity and his desire to avoid entanglement in local rebellions against the Byzantine authority. This stance, however, did not prevent Frederick from securing a marriage alliance with the Serbian prince, a move that, while cautious, was perceived by the Byzantines as an antagonistic act. Now, the reorganization of the army in Nice underlines Frederick's strategic foresight. Dividing the forces into 4 distinct segments aimed to enhance maneuverability and discipline as they entered regions under stronger Byzantine influence. The restructure was a preemptive measure to ensure the Crusade's integrity amidst the potential hostilities. Upon reaching Sofia, the absence of welcoming Byzantine delegations and the lack of provisions were somewhat telling signs of the deteriorating relations between the Crusaders and Byzantium. The unopposed passage through the Gate of Trajan highlighted the Crusaders' forces' formidable presence, capable of prompting a Byzantine garrison's complete withdrawal, either through the mere sight of its scouts or a direct engagement led by Frederick himself. The arrival in Pazardik to find ample supplies was a much-needed reprieve for the Crusaders, emphasizing the fluctuating fortunes of such an expansive military and diplomatic endeavor as they continued to inch closer and closer to their ultimate goal. Now Barbarossa's crusading journey through the Byzantine territory towards the Holy Land was also fraught with diplomatic tensions along with military confrontation. At Pazardik, the situation escalated when Frederick learned through his envoy, Lectophorus, of the disdainful treatment his previous envoys had received. another sign of the deteriorating relationship with Byzantium. The reception of Isaac Angelo's letter, downgrading Frederick's imperial title and levying accusations against him, marked another significant rupture. Isaac's demand for hostages in exchange for safe passage further strained these relations, leading to Frederick's decision to await the release of his envoys before considering any agreement. The breakdown in diplomacy pushed Frederick and his forces towards more aggressive tactics. The capture of Philippopolis and subsequent military actions against nearby Byzantine forces signified a shift towards open hostility. Frederick's strategic occupation of territories and the local Armenian and Bulgarian populations' pledges of support was just another example of how complex things were becoming. Now, Isaac II's countermeasures, including harassment strategies employed by the protostrator Manuel Cametises, culminated in a significant clash near Prosinos, highlighting the ongoing intensity of the conflict. But despite all these challenges, Frederick's forces continued to advance, eventually crossing into Anatolia. Once in Anatolia, despite initial assurances of safe passage from the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, Frederick's army faced continuous assaults. The decisive victory at the Battle of Philomelion, against a significantly larger Turkish force, mind you, showed the Crusaders' martial prowess, and it certainly dealt quite a morale hit to the Turks. However, the continuous harassment from the Turks led Frederick to move to capture Iconium, dealing a substantial blow to Turkish forces and capturing the Seljuk Sultanate's capital. Tragically, Frederick's crusade came to an abrupt end with his untimely death in the Salef River. This loss significantly demoralized his forces, prompting a large contingent to simply return to Germany. The remaining crusaders, now under the command of Frederick's son, faced further hardships, including disease in Antioch, which significantly reduced their numbers. And despite not achieving the ultimate goal of capturing Jerusalem, Barbarossa's campaign inflicted considerable damage to the Turkish forces and captured critical territories. And he has to be proud of that. Rest in peace, Freddy. Now, between the spring and autumn of 1189, two principal fleets from northern Europe embarked on independent voyages towards the Holy Land, with additional, smaller-scale ventures likely setting sail around the same period, with some possibly as early as the previous year, 1188. Now the first fleet, a sizable international assembly, left England during the Lent of 1189, and it was a formidable force, comprising around 10,000 men and 50 to 60 ships from diverse origins, including England, Denmark, Holland, the Rhineland, and more. This fleet made a strategic stop in Lisbon before engaging in a significant assault on Alvor, where it overcame the Almohad defenders in a brutal confrontation. Its journey culminated in its arrival at Acre on the 1st of September, adding to a significant force of the siege already occurring there. The Second Fleet, though smaller at its outset, with 11 ships departing from Germany in April, gained notable attention due to the survival of a first-hand account the De Itinere Navali, and distinguished by its composition of mainly commoners. The fleet expanded upon reaching Lisbon in early July, joining forces with the English contingent that had departed in May. Recruited by King Sancho I of Portugal, this enlarged fleet, now boasting 38 vessels, laid siege to Silves, culminating in the city's surrender after 45 grueling days. The fleet's contribution extended beyond military exploits. Upon its arrival at Acre between April and June of 1190, materials from its ships were repurposed to establish a field hospital, marking the genesis of the Teutonic Order. But not all encounters were victorious. The winning streak couldn't go on forever. The Bayan of Ibn Idari recounts a naval engagement near the Strait of Gibraltar during the spring of 1190, where a northern fleet clashed with the Almohad navy. This encounter ended in defeat for the northern fleet, a narrative conveniently absent from Christian chronicles, and it suggests the selective recording of events based on cultural perspectives. In a distinct episode during the summer of 1190, an English vessel, separated from its fleet, found itself in Silves amidst a siege by the Almohads. There, at the behest of Bishop Nicholas, a veteran of the 1189 expedition, the English crusaders lent their strength to the city's defense, contributing to a successful outcome. Their reconciliation of Henry II of England and Philip II of France at Gisors in January 1188, marked by their mutual decision to take up the cross, set the stage for a united Christian front against Saladin's control over the Holy Land. The imposition of the Saladin tithe in their realms, a novel fiscal strategy absent in the Holy Roman Empire, showcased the extensive commitment to financing the military expedition by any means necessary. Back in Britain, the crusading call resonated deeply, with Archbishop Baldwin of Forde's successful recruitment drive across Wales, a campaign vividly captured in the writings of Gerald of Wales. Following Henry II's death in the July of 1189, Richard I, known as Richard the Lionheart, ascended to the English throne, swiftly turning his attention to the Crusade. His proactive fundraising efforts, alongside early departures of his subjects by sea, underscored a general feeling of widespread zeal for the campaign. In April 1190, a significant segment of the English crusading fleet set sail, engaging in military actions that included both cooperation with the Portuguese against the Almohads and unfortunate hostilities back in Lisbon. Richard's rendezvous with Philip II in Vézelay, and their joint journey to Lyon, followed by separate paths to the Mediterranean, highlighted a logistical challenge of such a massive uptaking. Richard's impatience in Marseille and subsequent journey to Sicily, along with the English fleet's direct voyage to Messina, further illustrated a complexity of medieval naval coordination. It was never easy. Now, the politics in Sicily, recently altered by the death of William II and the accession of Tancred, introduced personal and diplomatic tensions, notably with the imprisonment of Joan of England. Richard's military response in Messina, coupled with the dispute over his marital intentions, strained his alliance with Philip. Nevertheless, both monarchs persisted in their crusading mission, with Philip departing for the Middle East ahead of Richard. Now Richard's subsequent naval misfortune near Cyprus and his encounters with Isaac Ducas Comnenus brought unexpected challenges, leading to the strategic conquest of Cyprus. This debacle, while debated among historians regarding its motivations, significantly impacted the Crusades' logistical base and expanded Richard's influence in the eastern Mediterranean. Now, upon Guy of Jerusalem's release in 1189, he found his authority in Tyre challenged by Conrad of Montferrat, whose defense against Muslim sieges had made him popular and bolstered his position. Undeterred, Guy set his sights on Acre, assembling an army and joining forces with Philip's arriving French contingent. And despite their effort, they faced Saladin's counter-siege, trapping them inside the walls of Acre. Tragedy struck in the summer of 1190, when a disease outbreak claimed Queen Sibylla and her daughters, leaving Guy's claim to the throne quite precarious. The succession crisis deepened as Isabella, Sibylla's half-sister, was swiftly divorced and remarried to Conrad of Montferrat, positioning him as a new contender for the crown. The winter of 1190–91 saw the Crusader camp ravaged by illness, claiming notable figures including Frederick of Swabia and Patriarch Heraclius. With the return of the sailing season, reinforcements finally arrived, including Leopold V of Austria and Philip of France. Richard the Lionheart's arrival in June 1191 energized the siege efforts against Acre, leading to its capture in July. However, the victory sowed discord among the allies over the division of spoils and the contested kingship of Jerusalem, with Richard supporting Guy and Philip and Leopold backing Conrad. Philip and Leopold's subsequent departure from the Holy Land, each for their own reasons, left Richard to continue the campaign. Despite initial attempts at diplomacy with Saladin, including a proposal for a face-to-face meeting which was rebuffed by Saladin, relations between the two leaders remained tense. And this tension escalated when Richard ordered the execution of 2,700 Muslim prisoners, prompting Saladin to retaliate against his Christian captives. The strategic significance of Acre's capture was soon followed by the Battle of Arsuf, where Richard demonstrated his military prowess against Saladin's forces. Despite Saladin's attempt to disrupt the Crusaders' march towards Jaffa, Richard's tactical acumen led to a crucial victory, undermining Saladin's invincibility and bolstering the Crusader morale. This victory enabled Richard to secure Jaffa, a vital step towards an eventual march on Jerusalem, and a significant blow to Saladin's control over the region. After the victory at Arsuf, Richard the Lionheart focused on consolidating his gains, taking Jaffa and establishing it as his base. Efforts to negotiate peace with Saladin through his brother Al-Adil, involving propositions of marriage to Richard's relatives, ultimately failed. Richard then marched to Ascalon, a strategic location recently dismantled by Saladin, aiming to fortify it against future Muslim assaults. As 1191 waned into winter, Richard's forces advanced towards Jerusalem, buoyed by intelligence of Saladin's reduced army and low morale within the city. Despite nearing Jerusalem, adverse weather and strategic concerns about potentially being besieged by Muslim reinforcements compelled a retreat back to the coast. Politics once again shifted dramatically with Conrad of Montferrat's election as King of Jerusalem, a position he would never formally assume due to being murdered. Likely influenced by the complex web of alliances and enmities that characterized the crusade, you were never really safe. It was one thing to worry about Saladin, but oftentimes the people around you who wanted your position as king were a lot more likely to do you in the middle of the night. Now, this period also saw Guy of Jerusalem compensated with Cyprus, indicating a fluid nature of power and territory during the conflict, with different little islands and territories being passed around between rulers like a hot potato. Now, Richard's strategic focus extended to fortifying Ascalon and engaging in skirmishes with Saladin's forces. That was the priority. He came to the Holy Land to do one thing, and that was get Saladin. So, despite a second march on Jerusalem, internal divisions within the Crusader ranks, particularly disagreements over whether to directly attack Jerusalem or to first weaken Saladin's base in Egypt, led to yet another withdrawal. This internal discord was just characteristics of the challenges of maintaining a unified crusading effort against a resilient and tactically savvy opponent. That being said, the Muslim side had their own political intrigues, didn't they? The sudden capture of Jaffa by Saladin's forces in July of 1192, amidst internal unrest within his army, set the stage for one of the Third Crusade's most dramatic episodes. Despite the city's fall and the disarray within the Muslim ranks, Richard, upon learning of Jaffa's plight, mounted a daring naval counterattack with a modest but very skilled and motivated force. His unexpected assault not only took the Ayyubids by surprise, but also successfully liberated the city and the Crusader prisoners, which helped bolster his depleted forces. Now, Saladin wasn't going to take that lying down, of course. His attempt to reclaim Jaffa through a stealth attack of his own was thwarted by the vigilance of the Crusader forces, and unfortunately for Saladin it resulted in significant casualties for the Muslim armies. This defeat at Jaffa was not only a strategic and symbolic importance of the coastal cities, but it really marked a turning point in the crusade, reinforcing the Crusader state's position along the Levantine coast. The aftermath of the Battle of Jaffa led to the negotiation of a treaty between Richard and Saladin. This agreement, while maintaining Muslim control over Jerusalem, allowed Christian pilgrims and traders safe access to the Holy City. That was the Treaty of Ramla of 1192, a significant concession that reflected the mutual respect and pragmatism of both leaders. Oh, and I've said it in several other videos. Don't think that Saladin was this cartoonish bad guy villain. he was quite the opposite. Many of the crusaders actually remarked that his demeanor and the way he was with people was quite conducive to a chivalrous conduct. Well, if only all of their own leaders could be following the rules like that. Well, this treaty of Ramla, concluded the campaign, and it also allowed the Crusaders to retain a coastal strip extending from Tyre to Jaffa, which ensured their continued presence in the Holy Land. The recapture of parts like Galilee and the shared control of strategic locations like Ramla and Lydda between the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Ayyubid Sultanate definitely highlighted how nuanced territorial negotiations can be. And of course, this nuance to agreements and making of compromises certainly characterizes that both sides were certainly in no position to be fighting to the death. Now, despite the Muslims maintaining control over Jerusalem, the treaty's position for safe pilgrimage to the city by Christians represented a notable achievement in an era that was marked by religious conflicts, facilitating a period of relative peace and relative coexistence. Now a little side quest for you. The acquisition of Cyprus significantly bolstered the Crusader states by providing a valuable logistical and military base that would support future Christian operations in the region. Yeah, spoiler alert, there are more crusades to come. This strategic gain was very important, and they would use it a lot later on. So, what do people think about the Third Crusade? Well, if you ask a lot of modern historians, they'll tell you lots of different things. Some people view it as a general success for prolonging the existence of the Crusader states and securing concessions that allowed Christian access to Jerusalem. Others, well, they critique it as an outright failure for not achieving its primary objective of reclaiming Jerusalem, or deemed the high costs, in terms of both human lives and resources, as rendering the expedition hardly justifiable. What do I think? Well, I think the fact that Christians could now walk into Jerusalem wearing their crosses, and they were basically protected by a treaty that was agreed on by a Muslim and a Christian, Saladin and Richard. I think this mutual understanding that the Christians were going to show up, they were going to say their prayers, and the holy city wasn't just holy for one side. Well, I think that's a victory in itself. Can't have Jerusalem all to ourselves, can't we? Of course, in our modern day, the fight for Jerusalem sadly continues in other ways. But who wants to get demonetized talking about that? Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the Third Crusade. I'd like to thank my Mega Chad tier patrons, that being JC and Stark Factory. Thank you guys for your contribution. And I'd like to thank you for listening all the way through. If you'd like to make a contribution or support the channel, just follow the links to the Patreon or like, comment and subscribe. That's also good. But until next time, thank you very much for listening. And just relax. Good night.